I find it very hard to oppose industrial action taken by doctors. I have my own mantra playing in my head at the moment, and that mantra is, if you support every single strike ever called, you are almost as daft as the bozos who are diametrically opposed to every single strike ever called. They are people who could be loosely described as turkeys voting for Christmas. It's a little bit like the poor people who are opposed to a wealth tax. It makes very little sense intellectually, but somehow emotionally it packs quite a punch. Why, as a worker, would you be opposed to the exercise of workers' rights? I should make a list, shouldn't I, of seminal moments in my own so-called political awakening. But I've mentioned one of them to you before, and it wasn't actually industrial action per se. It was the exercise or the element that prompted some industrial action. I forget which public sector grouping it was. It may have been firefighters who were taking industrial action over changes to their terms and conditions, including their pension rights. And this is back when I used to accept the pittance that they offer you to go and review the papers on the telly. Times were hard, don't judge me. And I was sitting next to someone older than me, someone I knew, someone I quite liked, one of those columnists that has plied their trade in various different outlets, and perhaps inevitably for that generation of journalists has subsequently gone completely crackers and can be seen on a little watch television station near you, punting the, what we once would have called far-right talking points of the moment. But they thought that it was a valid argument to point out that many people in the private sector had had their pension provision filleted by essentially greedy owners, greedy bosses, the hoarders, if you like, of wealth. And therefore, people in the public sector shouldn't expect to hold on to theirs. And I've had a few moments like that in my life, and rarely have they actually resonated quite so long. I mean, 20-something years later, I find myself still marvelling at the boneheaded idiocy of that position. The turkeys voting for Christmas element of that argument. It is as if I got mugged yesterday and would therefore be calling for you to be mugged today. That is the logic. That is the ineluctable logic of arguing that because some people have been treated badly, nobody should expect to be treated well. Because X got hurt yesterday and has no protections, Y, who doesn't want to get hurt today and has some protections, should have those protections immediately taken away. I am, however, conscious of the fact that if you are in support of all industrial action, then you're almost as daft as the people who are against all industrial action. And somewhere between those two positions, there will emerge by 11 o'clock today a cohesive opinion. But I haven't got one at the moment. I've got an emotional opinion. And my emotional opinion is, not now, lads. Not now, lads. Callum's in Hull. Callum, what do you reckon?
I'm at the other end of the scale, so I'm about to start work as a resident doctor in August.
Right.
And for me, through medical school...
What will your starting salary be? Do you mind me asking you that question?
You can ask me that. My starting salary base pay is £36,000 a year.
So you would be rich enough not to get the winter fuel allowance if you were an old age pensioner.
Yeah, I haven't got that to worry about.
Go on.
And yeah, I'm leaving medical school with about, I'm just doing mortgage application. I've just checked my student debt balance, and it's at about £86,000 at the moment. And sort of what I've seen through medical school is my future profession constantly being degraded and let down by successive governments. I remember the initial strikes and the lack of respect that was given by Tory ministers.
Yes.
And now I feel like...
In contradicting the public feeling last time round, I think. I think the public were with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I just wanted to illustrate that when Wes Streeting made the deal with the BMA, it was not in writing, but it was alluded to that there would be a commitment to full pay restoration across the following years. And there was
years
also,
plural.
Yeah. So no doctor's asking to go to it straight away, I don't think. Obviously, that's the ultimate demand of the BMA. But as we know, that's never the final demand.
Well, here's the problem. It's a brilliant sort of jumping off point, because a couple of things you've said are absolutely resonating with me, and a couple of things are not. And one of the things that is not is the idea that you have suffered from the contempt of successive governments. And Liz tried to separate this from what happened last year. I honestly don't think that you can, mate, in the eyes of the public. I don't think you can say, forget about the 22% that we got last year, we want another 29. I just think whether it defies the laws of logic or not, I just don't think you can ask the public to do that. And they will see this as a government that met the demands of the resident doctors. Not all of them, admittedly, but they came a hell of a lot further than any of the previous Tory administrations that you've alluded to.
Absolutely, but what was within that deal as well was a commitment to sorting out our exception reporting system, which is where you report any extra hours worked. And a deal for that was meant to be done by the end of last year. And it only came into play sort of spring this year. And it was yet another failure that...
Well, it wasn't. It was a delay.
Okay, it was a delay. And when you're talking about getting paid for an extra 2 hours on top of a 12-hour shift already, those delays matter.
No, of course they do, but it's not. It doesn't justify the next round of industrial action, because it has actually been delivered, albeit belatedly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions, if I may, and thank you for opening yourself up to helping the rest of us understand this. When you were making your own decisions about what to do, when you were finishing your A-levels and looking at your options and going to medical school, how aware were you of the financial package available? And just so you know, because this is what I do for a living, it's not what you do for a living. I'm not trying to trip you up or do any gotchas here. I just want to know. I just want to work a few things out.
I'll be honest, it didn't really play into my mind because I was passionate about... I'm the first doctor in the family. I'm the first person to go to university. I wanted a profession that was respected and was a guaranteed job for life. And I just want to focus on that second part at the moment.
I can't be proud of you, Callum, because we've only just met. But when you described to me the fact that you're the first person in your family to go to university, let alone become a doctor, and you did so through a profound sense of vocation, and you didn't spend much time looking at the financial implications. You were too excited to be getting into medical school and getting stuck into your studies. When did the financial penny drop?
It was about in my third year of medical school when the competition ratios for choosing when you become the doctor you want to be in terms of specialties were going up and up. And now, I don't think they've released the latest ones, but last time I checked, the specialty I wanted to go to is 6-1 in terms of successful to unsuccessful applicants.
Right.
And that is a sort of state school first university graduate is really intimidating for me, because the thought of needing to be better than 5 other doctors is very difficult, and it's no longer that guaranteed progression of employment. And a lot of doctors are having to revert to sort of self-employed locum roles when they don't get into into specialty placement. And that has knock-on effects more widely in terms of life, in terms of mortgage applications and things like that. And it's just not got that security anymore. And I think part of the striking for pay is also getting back that professional security as well, if that makes sense.
It makes absolutely perfect sense. And I mean, there are hairs to split over the variables chosen by the BMA to make these comparisons between income now and income then. There are even hairs to split over why they've chosen 2008 as the comparison date. But nobody would argue that, like for like, a resident doctor is going to be as well off or as or better off, as secure. It's funny how language works, isn't it? You say they use secure, No one's going to be as secure today as they were 20 years ago. If you say richer, it feels immediately different. So that focused your mind. It didn't do anything to dissuade you from continuing your studies. And if I've understood you correctly, as you contemplate possibly not your dream career, if you contemplate the possibility of not getting into the role that you most want to get into, you worry that the deal you would be left with, or the life you would be left with, would be an insecure one.
Yeah, that's why you've got doctors working Uber and Deliveroo and things like that. It's not secure anymore, and that needs to be sorted out just as much as the pay dispute. And I think the reason why a lot of doctors have voted to strike is to show the government that they won't be pushed over on these issues. And there's many issues in medicine at the moment. There's the Leng Review imminently coming out as well. And all of these things add together to make a profession very unhappy and very insecure.
What is morale like among your cohort?
Awful.
Why?
One of my closest friends from medical school, she isn't becoming a doctor now, and that's because of the random allocation system as well. She's deferring a year, but if she doesn't get where she wants to work the next year, she can't go in again. That's it. That's the only other option, is to leave. So, or work in an area that's very far from a family and support network.
Which people don't want to do. And you've put me in precisely the position I was expecting to be put in, although not quite so completely, which is I can sympathise with every single thing you said, and yet there's something I can't get past when I come to what happened last year. It's why the first callers demand that we don't bring that into our contemplations. Also stuck in my craw is that people listening to this might have developed enormous sympathy for you, but they know that people in your position got a 22% pay rise last year, and that is something that they can only dream of. So how dare you, they would say, come back now and ask for 29% more?
Yeah, I think the other thing to look at is to move away from percentages. And I know you hate the word optics, but £17 an hour to £21 an hour for a doctor who looks after patients at the very sickest, straight out of medical school, when you're the only doctor on a night with only senior support there, you're looking after very sick patients with a lot of responsibility. And I don't think £21 an hour is asking for a lot for that.
That is probably the line that the union leaders should take, isn't it? Because again, if the difference between the word secure and the word rich is interesting, the difference between 29% after 22% and, well, that got us 17 an hour and we're asking for 21 feels like a very, very different proposal to me.
Definitely.